All right, in this last presentation in the self topic, we're going to kind of talk briefly about gender and what it's all about. Obviously, as you can read in the presentation, there is some biology to gender. That is, to some degree, a man is different from a woman, but the biological component of gender is just the start of the story, just definitely the start of the story. But there is definitely something there, like men are 5 times more likely to die, well, more likely to wiggle their ears. I mean, all kinds of different things. Okay? So most of gender comes from nurture, all right? That is so the environment that you grow up in, or the culture you grow up in. And so what we find is that different cultures will have different norms, gender roles to what is a man supposed to do and what is a woman supposed to do. And clearly, gender roles in the United States have changed with time, and gender roles across the world are different. But again, gender roles across the world are changing with time. Okay, so gender roles are pretty important. So here's another one of those articles I wrote for the Korean newspaper. And you find that male roles often are the product of the fact that men have traditionally been in charge of providing for the family. That many jobs occupied by men required physical labor, or as we'll discover in a few slides down, involved dangerous occupations. Traditionally, women were in charge of raising families, keeping the house. So, in this particular article, I wrote this one in response to the fact that so many of the Korean men that were living in the United States were trying to maintain a traditional Korean gender role relationship when they were living in a different cultural context. It was just a subtle way of saying, if you want to move to the United States, then you ought to be changing them gender roles a little bit. Okay? So, where does learning come from? That's fun. Here is just within the United States across time. Clearly, gender, there are differences. That is to say, men hold on to more traditional values of what, a woman is supposed to be. But even women hold on to at least some degree of traditional, gender differences. We find that different parts of the world have more egalitarian. That is to say, Finland and Germany are much more egalitarian. They're more likely to believe equality between the genders. In places such as Pakistan or Nigeria, you tend to have much lower egalitarianism, and that there should be large distinctions. Okay? So yes, though there are these differences, as I said on the last slide, if there is a low gender egalitarianism, this low level of is expressed by both males and females. Okay, and so here is a number that represents how equal or egalitarian, and you find that in the United States, we're not that open-minded, shall we say. We're middle of the pack here. You see, even places like Venezuela are more egalitarian than the United States, but we see there are some below us. So I guess the lesson is we got some work to do on this. Yeah, United States, blah blah blah. Yeah, oh, this is interesting. In the United States, and in many parts of the world, the male identity is essentialized. That is to say, um, when babies are born in the United States, they're sort of born with a maleness and then they become female. Among Hindu Indians, when a baby is born, they're born almost with a female identity. And we saw this earlier, and I forget the name of that tribe, but because the baby just spent 9 months inside of the mom, it doesn't matter what the gender of the baby is, the baby is essentially female, and maleness must be instilled into the boy child. Yeah, this is actually powerful. It's related to a different study. It might be, I bet you I have it in another presentation somewhere, but I'm just gonna say it. There was a study done that looked at the different kingdoms that were evolved in Hawaii. You know, in Hawaii there are tons of islands, a whole bunch of islands, and they were eventually brought together into the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1870s or somewhere around there. But prior to that, they were independent kingdoms. And so though there was some cross-cultural contact among the peoples of these islands, of course there was, yet there was still some independence to their development. And it turned out on these islands, some of these islands have a shallow lagoon, and to get food is easy. Getting food is simple. You just kind of go out there and walk out and, grab some food. Not nice. Some of the islands are surrounded by rocks, and therefore gathering food is quite difficult. You have to go out in boats, it's dangerous. And on those islands that had real rocky coastlines, and food gathering was dangerous. A man was a man and a woman was a woman. There was very little egalitarian views. But in those islands with a nice little lagoon, highly egalitarian gender roles emerged. And so in this study by Bostrup, it was very similar. And the argument was cultures that relied on plows, because plows are very dangerous, just like the rocky coastline makes it dangerous to go out and get fish. And you find, there's danger being large animals, the plows are sharp. I mean, all kinds of dangers will emerge. And so the idea is any culture that relied on a plow as their primary farming tool would evolve into a less egalitarian. Okay? And so persistence, oh yeah. And so here it is. Not only did they discover that there was this gender role differences based on the uses of plows, when they looked at immigration patterns into the United States, you found regional differences in gender role ideologies based on which immigrant populations landed here in the first place. And we've seen this evidence of persistence of culture multiple times. Remember our northern and southern Italy example previously. Here is sort of a map showing gender equality or gender related development. And it's 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 a reflection of egalitarianism. It's a reflection of, but it's too dependent on income. Yeah, it clearly the gender pay gap is a large portion of this GDI, but it's got to do with attitudes. And you can see that Western Europe and the United States is relatively equal in this way, relatively, or much closer. Other parts of Africa, for example, are quite unequal, and you'll definitely find those places are going to have larger gender role differences. So in another study, what they did was they took 300 adjectives and they asked people in 25 different countries, and they asked them, is this a man's word or is this a woman's word? Okay. And so what they did was, if 2/3 of a culture, the people in one group, agreed that it was a man's word, then it went into the man's word category. Then, of those, if 3/4 of the different countries, of the 25 countries, agreed, then it made the grade. And so all of a sudden, here we have some stereotypes that have been agreed upon by a large majority of people across 25 different cultures. And so here are the words that are associated with being a man, okay? A man is adventurous. Yeah, Indiana Jones. A man is autocratic. Oh, that's not as good. All right. A man is daring. Yes. Man is rude. Oh, shit. I keep trying to be a good guy, but you keep throwing them at me. So there is some stereotypes here that may be true. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, they might just be stereotypes, but if they emerged consistently across 25 cultures, maybe there's something to them. Women are sensitive, gentle, shy, curious. Okay? So there's all kinds of these things that may or may not be truths, may or may not be